Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming to the podcast. It's day 22, October 16th, my brother's birthday, because that matters. I am going to try to blow your minds today. I put together, it's a little bit complicated and it's thinking about things. So sometimes when I'm wondering why something is the way it is, I decide to look at it from the opposite point of view, right? So we talk all the time about immigration, migrants, and illegal immigrants, and all kinds of crazy stuff, right? But and why that's bad. The premise for this whole thing on the immigration is based on something that kind of makes me crazy. It's based on whites being in power and whites wanting to keep their power. There's other issues at the border. Not an idiot. I get it. There's other complexities, but there's a plan for it. But the problem is one of the problems with America and with Americans, and in this case, I am talking about white Americans very specifically, is that white Americans don't assimilate. There you go. There's the sentence. So, what if our big problem in the US is that white people refuse to change? Sorry, you're laughing because duh, Jen. But let's stay with it now. Okay, so if that's the complaint, and I'm a white person looking at this, if white people don't want to change, we have a problem. But what if they were? What if I told you that if you're willing to change, to open your mind, to stop thinking in terms of race, if you were to think in terms of what other people have to offer for you, if you were willing to change, what if I told you you could experience improved cognition, be a better thinker, more creativity, that's right, broader horizons when it comes to being creative or innovative, discover new traditions, new things that you didn't know existed that make your life better. I mean, let's face it, Santa Claus came from Germany. We got used to that. We brought it into our culture and we assimilated to that German tradition. So there you go. What if you also knew you could try new foods? Some of you are foodies. I'm not talking to the foodies. Y'all are already trying new foods. I am a food avoidant person, but I don't really like eating very much. So that's my problem. And you might even get colored powder thrown at your clothes. And if that were happening, you would be participating in a great assimilation event called Holi, which is a holiday called the Festival of Colors. It's a Hindu festival from India that celebrates the arrival of spring, love, and new life. And if you've never been to a Holi celebration, we went to one at our local museum, the Museum of Art History here in Santa Cruz. It was so fun. You have to choose your clothes. As you can see from this picture, if you're looking online, if you're watching me, you have to choose your clothes accordingly. Because when that powder gets into your clothes, it's yours. You get to keep that powder with you. You also might want a mask because it's powder and it goes everywhere, but it's super fun, not dangerous at all. So I love this because for democracy to really work, for democracy, okay, you know me, I'm going to come back to democracy, right? That's what this is about. For democracy to work, we need to coexist, but we actually need to do better than coexist. We need to coexist, and I know it takes effort and requires each of us to adapt, and that means recognizing our differences and celebrating our similarities, sometimes changing how we think and act. So this is a big deal. I think it's really an opportunity for a lot of Americans, white Americans, but you know what? You don't have to be white to be afraid to assimilate. Some ethnic groups come here and they stay within their own ethnic group, which I get. I would totally do that too. Let's be clear. The first thing I would look for somewhere else is other Americans. Why? I don't know, because some other Americans are real ghastly. But it would be my natural inclination to find my people, right? So in this case, there are many groups that can assimilate. I'm talking to white people because we don't even think about it. We don't even entertain the thought of changing. That's how much our privilege operates. It is up to how many times have you heard somebody go, speak English? Screw you, white person. Person was talking in their own language to someone else who speaks in that language. They didn't want you to be in their conversation. Get a hint. So that's what I mean by assimilating. There's lots of opportunity for everybody. So when assimilation comes in, we typically think of it as something minority groups have to do, learning to fit in with the dominant culture. But assimilation can't be just a one-way street for a society to be truly inclusive. It has to be two-way. It should be a mutual process where everyone, especially the majority, tries to understand, respect, and embrace the diverse cultures around them. And there were no eating of cats and no eating of dogs in Springfield. And no, it doesn't mean we have to accept something that we might think is criminal. But that wasn't happening. It was a scare tactic. It was designed to divide and conquer. And it did. J.D. Vance and Trump feel very, very good about what they did. When assimilation happens both ways, so me, I'm assimilating, you're assimilating, we're all assimilating together, it strengthens our communities and brings us closer to the ideal of a democracy where everyone belongs. So in this case, I'm not talking about giving up your identity. That's not what I mean by assimilate. And we'll talk about that coming up. I don't mean to lose yourself. I mean to maintain yourself in the broader context of the world. So it means white people don't walk around and tell other people they can't do that because it makes white people uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable is okay. We can all survive being uncomfortable. Like it, have fun, depends on how long it lasts, but we can survive uncomfortable. That's not really dire consequences, folks. So that's what we're talking about here. All right. So when we think about it, the biggest problem with something like assimilation, and you can choose any word you want, mixing, forming community. I'm using a trigger word on purpose today because I'm trying to jar people into thinking. You don't have to think about it in these stark terms. That's the really important thing. Make it work for you, but just get my point. Assimilation is complex because cultural integration and mutual understanding work in societies with diverse populations. I don't know why it's so hard for people, but that's what works. It's the idea of integrating and understanding how we are different and how we are unique and how we are the same is the key here. The idea of assimilation often refers to immigrants adapting to the dominant culture. That's how we always talk about it. It often refers to, let's face it, some of us high-minded liberals can sit here and pretend like we want assimilation and we can talk about it, but it is right now usually based on immigrants adapting to the dominant culture. And dominant does not necessarily mean majority, by the way. Dominant can be because we have socioeconomic power, but we have the tools of law enforcement at our disposal. I mean, there's a lot of ways. Well, we'll talk about it. Okay, there's a lot of ways this kind of stuff is systemic. So anyway, in recent years, there's been more of a focus on reciprocal assimilation or integration. Maybe that's a better word for you, integration, where members of all groups work to understand, respect, and incorporate elements of each other's cultures. For white Americans, this can mean embracing multiculturalism. Oh, are you scared? I used the big word. That can be scary for some people. We need to acknowledge systemic histories and being open to diverse perspectives. I thought one of the things I really appreciated yesterday, which I'm going to get this, Charmaine the God, is that his name? Charmaine the God. Kamala was on his podcast. This is how white woman I am. Like, I'm trying to remember this stuff. But what I loved in listening to her on that town hall is she was asked hard questions and talk about diverse perspectives. I had to hear some hard questions. Donald Trump won't even listen to the questions, right? Much less be able to babble an answer that makes any sense. He was out there taking hard-ass questions and responding to them in the least responsive way is listening. If we could just learn to listen, that's actually responding to someone. It's actually huge and healing. But we're so bad at it. So she, not only did she listen, she had answers. Okay, so you don't have to, I know we've got a trigger and people are heads up, ears up, looking out for this, but assimilation reframed as collective integration and mutual understanding emphasizes collaboration and respect among all cultures. Guys, we're just asking everybody to be treated like a meaningful, vital, normal human being. Just see them for who they are. See the person. Don't see all the labels, all the garbage you put on them, fat, thin, short, tall, white, black, scary, not scary. Like, we just do all that crap and it's in our own heads. It's in our heads. I've talked about this before, but it was one of my missions. Katie and I used to always go with my mom. Oh, I miss these trips. We used to always go to the Handlery, which is a private hotel on Union Square. It's fantastic. If you ever need a great hotel, it's the Handlery. Anyway, I am saying handle, E-R-Y. It's a weird word. Anyway, Mr. Handlerly is there. Like, you can meet the property owner. He's a great guy. So one of my missions one time, we went down there, we go to Thanksgiving, we go for Thanksgiving weekend, so we're right there for Black Friday, right? Because I could give a crap, but Katie thought that was the height of being a girl. And I would go into the stores, and my thing was to chat up people that didn't look like me. It was so fun. And I in particular remember this huge black man in the large clothes women's section where I go, the large sizes. And he's picked out this outfit. He's just looking like he's not sure. And I go, is that a present? He said, yeah. And I go, is it for my mom? And I said, okay, is she tall? Yes. I mean, I talked to him about it. I go, she's gonna love it. He got so excited. He had no one validating. Everybody was ignoring him in that section, as you might imagine. Old ladies in the fat clothes, they're gonna be really scared of a black guy. But the thing is, he was so excited to need somebody to talk to so badly about his decision making. And it was the best because you know what? It blew my expectations of what would happen in that moment. That's what I'm always doing my social experiments. But he was just so happy to talk about it and talk about what he was getting his mom and to be prideful and all those things you feel when you're a kid buying your mom a present. And the guy, I think he was maybe 22 or 23, like he wasn't a kid. He was an adult, but you could tell he just really thought about it. He put a lot of effort in, and it was so nice to make that contact. And so that's my social experiment. Go talk to people you wouldn't normally talk to. It blows their minds. They don't expect it, especially minority youth do not expect me to talk to them. But of course, I'm doing improv, so I talk to everybody. It's a problem. Okay, so here's when assimilation is brought up, when we start to talk to people about this, there are some ways we can start to manifest this kind of change. So let me just take you through some of the steps that are required to make change and what they can do and how we can go about doing it. And I just am putting these in your head for you to think about, because later I'm going to tell you the theories that show that these things really matter. But I started off with, like, you want to be a better thinker, you want to be more creative. By focusing on embracing other folks and their individual experiences, it makes us a better people. It makes us better people. It makes us a better place, but it makes us better people. So you can start to manifest these changes through a few things. One is education and awareness. We have effectively shut down DEI. DEI was not the horror that you think it was. It was actually just being mindful of noticing each other's differences and incorporating it in useful ways so that we could make all of our environments better. When people get along, the environment is better. But okay, that's a shame. But we still have education and awareness is available. It can happen at schools, workplaces, churches, communities, fostering understanding of history and cultural traditions. That's very cool. There was one school Katie went to where everybody was allowed to celebrate their holiday, whatever that holiday was. We, of course, celebrate on birthday, but when we do some of the other holidays as well that are different from most kids. But it was just awesome to just see what the kids would bring in and how they told their story of why they do the celebration they do. So here's the prescription. If you want to change things by education and awareness, communities can promote cultural understanding. This is all written down. I'm just going to share it with you though to think about, especially hopefully if you're driving or exercising or something, you start to think about these things in your mind. Communities can promote cultural understanding through events and programs that bring people together meaningfully, like my Museum of Art History doing Polly. Hosting cultural festivals allows residents to experience diverse traditions, food, music, and storytelling events like living libraries. They help the community members share personal stories, fostering empathy and breaking down stereotypes. Oh my God, I forgot another good one. It's like when they tell kids to go interview someone, encourage your kid to step out of their comfort zone and interview somebody that's not like them, that has a different kind of life. I know woke parents are already doing that because you think about that all the time. How do you expose your kids to more, to more, to more? That's one of the reasons I bought a tiny house and saved money so Katie could travel, because I wanted her to experience the world. I wanted her to be a global citizen and understand there's many people on this planet solving problems in different ways than the way we solve them here. That's a little bit backfired because now she points out all the time what we're doing wrong, but there you go. So those kind of things, workshops on cultural awareness and history held at libraries or community centers, expose yourself to those things. There are so many activities that are already going on, but you have to opt in. And every time you opt in, especially if you take family members or people that are not used to being in a different ceremony, different situation, sorry, not ceremony, setting, if you take them with you, you are exposing them and you're having a good time too. So that's some way I want you to work on education awareness. Just open up that filter in your brain to say, I need to tune in more to participating in things that I might not normally do. The next one is open dialogue. That's a little bit like my social experiment of talking to people that don't look like me. Conversations, I don't go here though, I don't go to race, but conversations about race, culture, and identity help break down stereotypes and challenge biases. Now, I am the idiot woman that will ask, and I do read the room first, but I will ask why something is happening the way I don't expect. if it means I might understand next time how to be a better person, if it will give me insight. And I'll usually set it up that way, which is, I've never seen that before. Why do you do it that way? Or, hey, that's new to me. That looks really cool. What are you doing? Like, just like that. Like, suddenly you just entered their space with curiosity and kindness. So you can learn about what people are doing just by having this open dialogue. And you don't only go as far as you're comfortable with. Don't go too far. You're not trying to make enemies and you're not trying to change the whole world. You're trying to change your mindset, right? So open dialogue can play a powerful role in creating understanding and reducing stereotypes. So you can organize dialogue groups. They exist. I have a friend who works in this space of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And they do a lot of these dialogue groups. They particularly do them at companies where there's ways to make people, like, often if you have a large group in Silicon Valley, for example, we would have a large group of engineers who are here from other countries, most often India, which I have a special spot in my heart for my Indian engineers because there's some of the nicest, kindest people I've ever met. Oh my God, they're so much better than Americans. They're just so kind. But it's clearly a value in India to just be gentle and kind. Maybe it's from living with multi-generational families. I don't know, but my experience in Silicon Valley with people from India is very positive. So having these dialogue groups, having them at work, bringing together people for social groups with social events with different backgrounds to discuss race, culture, and identity. If everybody knows they're coming to have that conversation, it's a very different situation. You don't want to catch people off guard with this if they're not prepared. But you can be curious if you're gentle and if it's honest. You're being authentic. You're not trying to manipulate the situation. Okay, the next thing you can do is do fun culture exchanges. Did you know that delicious cappuccino that you drink is from Italy? Did you know? I might be full of crap. I just made that up. What I'm saying is that we are. Oh, I didn't fact check that one. Sorry, guys. I just cappuccino. Though. It's a cappuccino. Anyway, my point is that we are influenced all the time by things from other countries and other cultures. And white people then take it and call it a French fry. No, that's a bad one. Well, those are chips in England. But they take things and then we rename it horrible, horrible American names for things. And then we act like it's ours. So, or we Americanize it, which is even worse. Sorry. I started thinking about what's happened to certain things that have just really got ugly since Americans got hold of it. But the point is, have these cultural exchange, find out about what the traditions and languages are, learn, like, one of the things that's hilarious for me is Yiddish. I love Yiddish. I cannot remember it hardly at all. But when you have somebody who knows it and can tell you like some of the good expressions that you have in Yiddish, super fun. Like so fun. And going back to understand how Yiddish kind of came along, it's cool stuff. Like we can't afford to lose this history. And why would we not honor it in each other? It's cool stuff. So invite people over, foster genuine connections. White Americans engaging in diverse cultural experiences, not as spectators, but as participants, can immerse themselves in shared practices, which broadens their perspectives and builds mutual respect. So if anybody's not white listening to this, you can slap us around. Well, not everybody. You can slap a lot of us around and teach us how to be cool. It's like me learning to eat gumbo and learning how anybody who eats gumbo now, how you get the chicken off the bone without like being a total pig, because part of gumbo is the full facial and body experience of eating gumbo, right? It's so good. Real. Yum. Okay. The next thing you can do that's very personal is that you need to do some self-reflection and accountability. So just check in on yourself. Understand what your privilege is, what your history is, and what your personal biases are, and how to tune those up, because you could be more empathetic and aware by just understanding what you're bringing to the party and it may not even be conscious, guys. That's why it's tuning in and starting to see your own behaviors. You might have some behaviors that you aren't proud of, but you haven't really noticed in the past. One of the things I try really hard to do is if one of the benefits of growing up in my family is we didn't have overt racism anywhere. I know I still have racism in me. I'm not an idiot, but we didn't have it overt. Like it just wasn't discussed in our house, and because we grew up in a heavily Hispanic migrant worker town, Santa Paula, California, very high agriculture. My dad was a lawyer, but those were a lot of his clients, and they were a lot of our friends, right? So these are people we worked with and we lived with and we went to school with. It was a lot like Watsonville, California, too, where it's a high migrant influenced town. So it changes you. What was my point? Oh, my point is that you have to, when you're going out, one of the things I'm afraid of, that was it. One of the things I'm afraid of is that a lot of old white people become racist in their old age. And to fight that, because remember, your inhibition goes down as you age. We talked about inhibitions becoming less and less as you age. I told Katie, I think I figured out the one word that's going to slip out, and I'm not proud of it. And I hear it myself use it sometimes, and that's the word, the R word, retarded. That's a bad word, and I'm proud that I use it. But it's something from my childhood, so my inhibition sometimes slips. I really worry about being my inhibition around racism, and because I'm not actively speaking in racist terms, like that's not what I do. I don't think that'll be an inhibition problem because it's just not what I believe. I just don't believe people are bad because of the color of their skin or where they come from. But it is something to watch. So this, and I'm talking about this in self-reflection and accountability because it's important as we age that we don't get too concrete in our beliefs and values, that we remain learners as we age. The best, most resilient people remain learners as they age, and they are aware of their ineptitude. So I'm aware that I have a problem with the R word, and I'm trying like hell to get it out of my lexicon and my brain, which of course is only making it more apparent. But that's the idea. Take that self-reflection and accountability and focus on understanding other, not just understanding yourself, but understanding other. For white Americans, being part of a dominant culture helps understand broader social dynamics. Self-awareness can drive meaningful actions that positively support equality through advocacy. So once you're aware of your stuff and once you know where your strengths and weaknesses lie and you know what you're doing, the self-awareness can help you become an advocate, participate in community events, and continue to grow personally. There's very good benefits of this. And then the last one is looking for inclusive policies and practices. So this is when you have a chance to make a difference in someone's life by making a policy better. Like there's one going on in Texas. I think it's Texas. I might have the state wrong. There's a kid, a Black kid who looks about 17 or 18. Actually, he's wanting to graduate. He can't graduate because he won't cut his dreads. That's just BS. That's completely BS. What the hell did his dreads have to do with it, whether he earned a diploma or not? That's white people imposing their, in this case, I believe it's rage, on a Black man who deserves his diploma and doesn't need to cut his dreads because it makes you uncomfortable. This is where the uncomfortable part comes in, right? All of us can deal with uncomfortable. It's a livable thing. Anymore, maybe you have an issue, but uncomfortable is something we can survive. So there's a good example of when you have an opportunity, like if you were in that school district where that kid was not allowed to graduate because of dreadlocks, that's a fight you should get involved in. That's a fair fight. And you know that kid needs more white people on the side. In fact, there's my friend who's dealing with some racism here in town. I'm like, God damn it, I hate that white people being involved is what will help her. But right now to cut through the bullshit, yeah, that's what's going to help right now. And I'm willing to take up that cause. So you need to figure out where you can take a stand and where it matters to you, but look for these microaggressions, look for these policies and practices that hurt people because of race, because of their culture, because of their ethnicity. That's bonkers, just completely bonkers. Good place for you to show up. All right, so unfortunately, of course, racism rewards terrible behavior and reinforces divides. That's some of the deal of racism, is that affiliation gets people very excited. They feel like they belong to something. I had that happen with one of the teenagers who got involved in a drug selling group. It was the same concept. There are so many socio-emotional rewards for belonging to a group that exceed what the group is doing. So in this case, this kid, who's very, very bright, got involved with this group, and it was very much like a family. And he got everything he did not get at home from this group of drug dealers. And unfortunately, he got arrested, as you might expect. But that's the same thing that happens in racism. You join this group, and suddenly you have friends. Suddenly you belong to something. You don't even care if it's ugly or stupid. You just belong, and that's what matters. That's what we're up against, folks. So I'm going to just take you through some of the things that we're up against if we want to have there be change. And we know we're going to have to heal this nation after this Trump and Harris election. We know we're in a world of hurt. We're divided as hell. It just makes me sick, is what we've done in the name of a white guy who wants to be president because he's a selfish pig. There's no other words for it. He doesn't care about our country. If he cared about our country, he wouldn't be running. He certainly doesn't have any plans for us. So here's what we're up against when we try to change these indoctrinated white values. And there's a lot of them are set up by the system of how this country runs. So I just am putting this again, this is to go in your brain just to have you start to think about these things and see if it changes how you act in the world. So here's a barrier to stop. These are the barriers to stopping racism. I'm going to do them a little bit fast because there's a lot and it made me sad. The first one is historic privilege and systemic structure. So this is the idea that white Americans held the dominant position in the US for so long, I mean, forever. They have created systems that reflect and uphold their values. Okay, it's called, by the people who study this, critical race theory. You want to have a CRT stroke, go ahead, I'll wait, whatever. Let me just stop. Okay, now we're back. Critical race theory is the argument that systemically things have been set up with a bias, and it's in there. And if you don't believe it, you need to study more because it's here. It's here everywhere. There is a bias against people of color, in particular against Black people, but against people of color. So this is one of our first issues, is the historical privilege. This dominance has led to an unconscious belief that there is little incentive to adapt to other cultures. Why? Ours is set up for us, right? Why would I have to adapt to you? You have to adapt to me. Such as societal norms, reflecting experiences and perspective. The systems of privilege, and here's where it impacts the most: housing, employment, and education. Those are the big ones where privilege benefits white people every time. Housing, employment, and education. They reinforce these beliefs, making integration feel unnecessary to many. I don't need to integrate with you. I got what I need. Get it? It's like, well, I'm already winning. Why am I going to bring you along? It's the opposite of that runner who helped the runner who missed the finish line and helped the person cross the finish line first. Was their win. I mean, it's just so interesting how historic and systemic structures basically support racism. And so if you dismissed CRT, you're chicken. You're chicken. I don't know what else to call you. Fear of loss. I called you a name. There you go. I ended the argument by calling you a name. That's in one of my earlier debate tactics, right? Be an asshole. That's what I was. Sorry. Fear and loss of status or identity. This one's huge. Some white Americans feel that multiculturalism threatens their social status, cultural identity, and national identity. This anxiety is sometimes called status threat, and it can lead to resistance to assimilate or adopt practices seen as, this is important, non-traditional. Research shows that when people perceive a threat to their group status, they're more likely to resist change and reject outside influences. So this is funny because a lot of the people who feel like they have status or identity, they might have the identity, whatever, but they don't have status. They don't understand they don't have status. But you know what? The little bit that they have as a white person, and it does help them with housing, employment, and education. That little bit of status they have, they want to keep it. They're going to hang on it to their life. Even though relative to real status, it's nothing. But here we are. This is how it builds, guys. This is why we're going over it. These are the things that reinforce racism. Socialization and segregation. So we know there's still sundown towns. We just had this conversation on social media. Trump has specifically chosen sundown towns for some of his rallies. And a sundown town is essentially get out if you're Black by sundown, because we can't promise your safety after dark. Think about that. That's insane. That's my cat. Barking. You're welcome. Hope that showed up really well on this. Sorry about that. Anyway, my point is there's sundown towns that still say get out of town. So we still have a problem with socialization and segregation. I know there's towns where bars are for white people only. And I know there's places I can't go because I am just not allowed in there because I'm a woman. So let's face it, segregation is reducing opportunities for genuine cultural exchange and learning. Every time we choose to be with people like ourselves and not like other, and I'm not saying do this all the time. like out there. I get it, everything in moderation. I'm super balanced about that. I'm just saying, look for opportunities to socialize and to fight segregation, because that's one of the things that's reinforcing racism. Another is the perception of assimilation as a one-way process. If you are on video, you've got to look at this picture. If you aren't watching the video, go into about the middle, and there's a picture of three kids, three Native American kids. First, they're in their Native American garb, and then they have been assimilate in the one-way process. We've turned them into young Midwesterners. Their hair's been cut, that you can still see who they are, but wow, did we just strip everything from them? Perception of assimilation as a one-way process emphasizes that it's the responsibility of the minority, to adopt the dominant culture's values. So we think we're so awesome, but we're not. We're not perfect. There's nobody out there that's perfect. And there's a lot we could gain by opening our eyes and opening our hearts to others. So it's very, very deeply embedded, that perception, that perception of assimilation being a one-way process. It's so deeply embedded that many people may not even recognize the potential benefits of adapting or integrating other cultures' perspectives. It's not, that's why when I started this, I go, I'm going to kind of blow your mind, because we don't even think about it the opposite way. What if we had to change? What if white people had to change? Other than if you're a real racist, and it's really not about change. It's just about being brave. And here's another one, political polarization in media. So we know we have happening on some of our media channels, complete racist dribble. I mean, it is white supremacy crap. Don't even, sorry, it's just so much. I can't believe it. So in fact, today, Colin's going to interview with Brett Baer, who's like the most sane person at Fox News. But we know that the political polarization and media influence is shaping attitudes about race and culture. And it's making multiculturalism and diversity. The reason I already was defensive about CRT and DEI. Why? Because Fox News has railed against it so hard that people hear those words and they turn off. And I don't want you to turn off when you hear CRT or DEI. We need to bring it back after this election. And maybe it's messaged differently because white people get uncomfortable. But the fact is, they're both very, very important. If we don't take a look at the systemic racism, and if we don't take a look at how we don't make things equitable, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. And the diversity is only going to make us better. It's going to make business better. It's going to make America better. It's going to make us better. You know, I'm an advocate of like, let's mess up our genes and let's go commingle, because stronger humans come from commingled genetics than from the same genetics. The same genetics all the time make us weaker. Commingled genetics, there's studies, I didn't pull it on that one. If you feel like you need to argue with me about that, let's go, but let's do it on Twitter. Okay. And here's the last thing, or no, it's not the last. There's still more. This is what got me so depressed. There's implicit bias and ethnocentrism. Of course, no person represents this better than Laura Ingraham, the woman whose family won't talk to her because she's bonkers. But man, is she racist. She holds implicit biases that favor her cultural norms and way of life without realizing it. I think she realizes it, but I think she doesn't realize how disgusting it is. Ethnocentrism is the tendency to view one culture as superior or one as the default, and it can unintentionally dismiss other cultural practices and values, and it can be a significant barrier to meaningful cultural exchange or adaptation. Laura Ingraham, I don't, honest to God, I don't know how she eats in a restaurant. I would be afraid to eat food any server brought me if I was Laura Ingraham. Am I nuts? Wouldn't you be afraid? All right. We have another big gap, which is, this is what DEI was trying to do. We don't have a real cultural competency education. We don't have a way to help people be better at understanding differences and moving through the differences, like actually teaching emotional intelligence, actually teaching how people who are different from one another can get to know one another. Some of the assignments where kids do things from their own personal traditions are great assignments. That starts to showcase some of that. But think of all the adults who don't have a clue how to have these conversations. So we're going to need to look at ways to teach, and it's probably going to fall a lot to businesses. And that's what we were doing. That's where we were heading with DEI. We were heading into the place where we could start to stop some of this built-in white supremacy crap. And then Elon Musk showed up as the master of white supremacy. So there you go. And the last thing is what you would expect is this economic and class-based divides. Now, this is interesting because it's not there yet, but we could eventually become close to still having a big divide between the extremely wealthy and the not extremely wealthy. But I would like to see more people of color start to show up in the extremely wealthy. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. And somebody like Sean Combs is not what I'm talking about. Man, is he the poster child for all the wrong decisions? But he's no worse than Murdoch or Weinstein or others. So there's, as you can see, diversity is everywhere, including priming when you have a lot of money. So the economic and class-based divides are going to be real. And I think from what I'm hearing out of the Harris administration's policies, if people aren't being stupid about it, there are going to be opportunities for all of us to take advantage of some tax savings and tax incentives, especially if you're an entrepreneur. I'm so excited. Tax incentives for your own business. So remember, those are for writing off expenses. You get this $50,000 write-off. That's for writing off expenses. So it's not for pretending and making up a business tomorrow. It's for having a plan and knowing where you're going to need to spend so you can take advantage of that $50,000. You can bet I'm working on my business plan right now. All right. So there is the part that makes this the opportunity that we're missing is that there is real value in Americans assimilating. And at this point, I'm just going to talk about all of us as one. All of us. If we all become this, and I'll tell you, Gen Z is not perfect, and I'm in California, so I'm biased again by what I see. But the Gen Z youth in Northern California, I like have to well, in the non-red areas of California, but I see a lot of Gen Zs being much better at integrating. It just comes naturally. It's not, the bias hasn't been logged into them. It might be the biggest upside for the media being fractured is that the Gen Z kids didn't grow up with the tropes that we all grew up with white guys being in charge and telling us what was true. They didn't grow up with that. They grew up with podcasters telling them, or bloggers or whatever they call it, YouTube influencers. That's what they're called. Influencers telling them what was popular and what they should pay attention to. And a lot of the influencers were not white. So that it really, in fact, I'm thinking, I think one of Katie's favorite is a Black gay name who's, she said, like amazingly insightful about things. Like that's something. Like the young people know what's going on. So here's what we need to do if we want to change. This is the cool stuff, and this is for all of us to do. Okay, so and this is based on studies. So there is research that shows, and they call it intergroup contact theory. Love academia. Gordon Allport has a theory that posits that positive interaction between people of different groups reduces prejudice. Ha ha! We call that exposure therapy over here on the street. But the idea is studies building on this theory show that increased contact between diverse groups promotes understanding, reduces stereotypes, and leads to more inclusive attitudes. Studies of school desegregation, for instance, demonstrated that when white students integrated into diverse schools, look at that, white students integrated, the whites integrated, they gained empathy and reduced bias towards other racial groups, which translated into more equitable attitudes in adulthood. Kids don't come biased, baby. Got to teach them. So look at this. If you don't bring the bias, if you can have contact, they bring white people in to be in a more diverse environment. The white people turn out to be decent human beings. They don't see the differences. And if they do see the differences, they appreciate that, which is a big, cool thing. So that's intergroup contact therapy, or theory, or what I call it, exposure therapy. Get your ass out there and go meet some people that aren't like you. Okay, the next one is multiculturalism and social cohesion, which is really, really big words meaning for when everybody gets together, the group stays together. Those that hang together stay together, right? And I love, for YouTube viewers, there's a picture of a little girl with a soccer ball because soccer was not American. That was not a thing. Guess what? We managed to adapt to soccer. And now I think there's like FIFA followers everywhere. That's like a huge thing. The research by psychologists and sociologists like Dr. John Berry suggests that multicultural societies where people from different backgrounds learn about respect, and learn about and respect each other tend to have higher social cohesion and psychological well-being. This is some of what happened in Springfield, Ohio, is that a number of the white people said, what you're saying isn't true. I love my Haitian neighbors and you need to back the hell off. And they came together in social cohesion. They formed a community around the issue and they stood together, two diverse groups. Wasn't everybody. We had the white boys and proud boys and not the white boys, the proud boys and something three and all those other haters out there trying to jack things up. But the reality is in Springfield itself, among the people, there was a whole group that was really hell-bent on saying, no, we're fine, leave us alone. We have social cohesion. We hang together as a community. All right, that's really important. So that means the more diverse you have, the more diversity you have, and the more exposure to it, the better you hang together as a group because you care about each other. It's kind of like a job. The next one is the cognitive and emotional benefits of cultural flexibility. I told you, you want to be smarter, you want to be a better, healthy, emotional person. Then studies in psychology indicate that exposure to multiple cultural perspectives improves cognitive flexibility. That means you stop having a shut down, hard, fixed way of thinking. Suddenly you can imagine other ways to solve the problem. Why? Because you've already opened your mind to being creative and to letting in new information. It's just a mindset. It's like, it's kind of part of your nature and versus your nurture. You could be taught to be curious, but your nature to be curious is very helpful and you should be using it. And you can see that you'll have real cognitive and emotional benefits from having this kind of cultural flexibility. And then of course, there's the community benefits and reduced social conflict. So in areas, in areas where there's focus on bringing people together, the community benefits, and there's less fighting and less anger. Sociologists have found that cities and neighborhoods that embrace integration and diversity, where people learn reciprocally, like I learn from you, you learn from me, from each other's backgrounds, tend to experience less social conflict. You know why? Because you can't blame them for the crap in your head because you actually know who they are. Research by Dr. Robert Putnam, for example, found that diverse communities that emphasize intercultural exchange have higher levels of trust, civic engagement. They trust each other more and they're working together for their town. That's all we want. That's what our job is as Americans. We nurture our democracy. So this is an opportunity to go after the community benefits and reduce social conflict, because the last thing is I'm going to tell you that having an open mind and learning to change also has positive psychological impact on identity. And what this means is identity formation has shown that people who integrate aspects of diverse cultural identities, instead of rejecting them, so you just embrace it and don't reject it, experience greater psychological well-being. I can tell you my hypothesis on why you could experience greater psychological well-being. It's because you're not afraid anymore. The minute you can let go of fear and trade that for knowledge and trade that for trust and trade that for getting along and building a community, that's going to change everything. You're not going to be afraid. And now, because the fear is knocked out of your brain, you actually have more cognitive energy to think good thoughts and to come up with other things to do that are beneficial to you and the community. So this positive psychological impact is huge. And the multicultural identity tends to have people that have this multicultural identity or this idea that they can exist in a multicultural environment tend to have higher self-esteem. So not haters, right? They have lower anxiety because they're not afraid and a greater sense of belonging. Again, once you can remove the fear, that stupid, annoying fear that Trump and Vance and all those bad people that are GOPs, and now I'm making you fear them, right? No, I'm angry at them. I do not fear them. I am so angry at them because the fear is so debilitating. It's so bad for our country. And it just ends critical thinking. So this is it. Once you can let go of that fear and become part of a more multicultural universe, you're going to have a better life experience. You're just going to live a better life. Think of all the Karens in the world who are out there yelling at people in cars, being where they shouldn't be, the people and the Karens. And what a waste of energy that is. The Karen is upset the person who wasn't doing anything wrong. The Karen's got herself up and tied up in knots. I don't know how they all probably on anti-diarrheals, right? Because they're so wound up. They've got their guts churning. Yeah, once we let go of that and become better people, the world starts to change. So I end with this. The 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 studies suggest that when people from dominant groups, such as white Americans, engage in reciprocal assimilation by learning from and integrating with other cultural perspectives, it really has a lot of benefits, far-reaching benefits for us, reducing prejudice, fostering personal and social reliance, and building more cohesive communities. We may not be able to pull this off before the election, but my hope is with this kind of content, when you think about your role in the world and what you're doing and how you exist and how you manage your day and the good efforts that you're making, because my listeners make good efforts, I want you to be aware of it. I'm mostly asking from this podcast is awareness, is to start to think and be conscious of the things, the choices they're making, the decisions we're making, and who we hang out with, how we think, how we vote, how we comport ourselves in the world. You can worry about migrants all you want, but I'm going to tell you, this is not our biggest problem. There are some problems, but it's not our biggest problem. Our biggest problem is fear. All right. Thank you for listening. I'll be back tomorrow. I hope this made you think. Please talk to me on Twitter, leave a comment, whatever. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.